Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be invited to take part in this exciting gathering. And thank you all for your stamina and your patience for coming early on the first day of the first year of a new year. This is a very exciting way to begin a new year, I think, talking about Sufism and its role in India. I'm sorry that the last speaker couldn't come to tell us more about the Chishti Sufi order in India. I was looking forward to going after that presentation and assuming that that speaker would enlighten us about the Chishti order in particular, after having heard a general introduction, and thank you for that, on the Chishti, Qadri, Naqshbandi, and Suhawardi orders in India, among others. And that's because the person I'm wanting to speak to you about, Siraj Aurangabadi, was a Chishti Sufi master in India. So I was hoping that some background would be given, and I could speak only on Siraj Aurangabadi's poetry and personality without having to say very much about the Chishti Sufi order. I think among this audience of highly educated and experienced people, I probably don't have to say much about the Chishti Sufi order. It's founded by Hazrat Muinuddin Chishti so long back in India. Most of you are very, very familiar with the personalities and teachings of that tariqah, much more than I am. So I will not say much about the Chishti Sufi order, and I'll say more about Sayyid Sirajuddin Hussaini, better known as Siraj Aurangabadi. He lived in the 18th century, that is, he died in 1763, according to the Western calendar. And he's well known as an Urdu poet, but he was also a Chishti Sufi master in Aurangabad, and a master patron of Qawwali music. So his role as a spiritual teacher and as a patron of music, Sufi music, is not as well known as his role in writing the Urdu ghazal. He innovated in composing Urdu ghazals, and he expressed mystical themes in the Urdu ghazal, and mixing mystical themes with romantic themes is one of the great innovations that he pushed. As you know, the Urdu ghazal is a very versatile poetic instrument. You could write philosophical themes, you can write mystical themes, you can write romantic themes, you can even write satirical themes in the ghazal. But Siraj Aurangabadi really specialized in mixing romantic and mystical themes. He was roughly a contemporary of Wali Dekkani, and Siraj, I would argue, is as important as Wali Dekkani, although he's much less famous. That is, many histories of Urdu literature say that Wali Dekkani was the real innovator in writing Urdu ghazals and spread them to the north of India, and the story of Urdu ghazal writing goes from there. But Siraj Aurangabadi stayed down here in the Deccan, didn't bother going up to Delhi, and is just as important a personality, I would argue. One interesting thing I've come across here in Hyderabad are some of the Persian poems of Siraj Aurangabadi. We have a divan of his, which is a very thick divan in Urdu. We know that he wrote Persian poetry when he was young, but it was assumed that the Persian poetry was lost. But here in the Salarjang Museum, there are some manuscripts that preserve some of his some of his Persian poems as well, and that's very exciting. And I'll present one of those to you today. The ghazal of Siraj, which has made him rightfully most famous, is the one that you quoted for us. Thank you. I'll present that to you now, along with some English translations that I've been working on. Of course, Urdu is not my mother tongue, and I ask for your indulgence and your patience if I try to read some of his poems for you in Urdu. My real work is not pronouncing Urdu correctly, which I stumble on all the time, but trying to make some translations into English of Siraj and other Urdu poets. That I see as maybe the contribution that I can give to the world. Of course, translating from Urdu to English is very difficult and is only an approximation. So I apologize in advance. So the poem of Siraj, which is most famous, is this: Khabare tahayyure ishq sun, na junun raha, na pari rahi, na to tu raha, na to mai raha, jo rahi so bekhabari rahi. You're all probably very familiar with that. Any of you who've seen the amazing film Umrao Jan, right, of Muzaffar Alam, that shows the young courtesan in Lucknow with her Maulvi, and her Maulvi recites this poem to her, and her eyes light up, and she thinks, I can also write ghazals. So some amazing Bollywood cinema has portrayed this particular ghazal. It's still sung also in Qawwali. It's one of the only poems of Siraj that's commonly performed in Qawwali, which I think is also why people are familiar with it. Khabare tahayyure ishq sun, na junun raha, na pari rahi, na to tu raha, na to mai raha, jo rahi so bekhabari rahi. Kabhi simte ghaib se kiya hua ke chaman zuhur ka jal gaya, magar ek shaahe nahal gham jise dil kahun so hari rahi. And there are some alternate versions of that line. Some of you may have heard it differently. Even in the printed edition of Siraj's Divan, there are alternate versions of this. Wo ajab ghadi thi main jis ghadi liya dars nuskhe ishq ka, ke kitab aql ki taaq par jo dhari thi yun hi dhari rahi, or khadi yun hi khadi rahi. There are variations. Kiya khak aatish ishq ne dile benawai Siraj ko na khatar raha na hazar raha. Na khatar raha na hazar raha magar ek bekhatari rahi. The actual ghazal is longer. I can't read the whole thing for you. I'll offer you an attempt at an English translation. See if you enjoy it as much as you enjoyed the original. I doubt you will, but we'll try. Hear news of love's bewilderment. No beauty remains, no feverish madness. No you remains, no I remains. All that remains is unself-consciousness. A wind blew in from the unseen world, scorching the garden of appearances. On pain's bare branch, just one bud, call it the heart, remains in greenness. Just now the king of oblivion has bestowed upon me nakedness's royal robe. No stitch of discernment's propriety remains, no veil rending insanity's lewdness. An amazing moment it was when I first learned from passion's pages. Ever since, reason's tome stood on the shelf and remains right there, readerless.